We've got to forgive. But see, most people don't understand what forgiveness is. So I want to talk about what forgiveness is not and what forgiveness is. And this message helped me because most people, they don't know. They didn't even, here's the thing. There's at least 5 of you in here, and there's many more watching online who have unforgiveness and you don't even know it. And before the end of the day, you're going to be on your knees at the altar repenting of that forgiveness so that you can walk back into the fullness of the blessings that God has ordained for you. Watch, it's going to happen. The word convicts. Amen. Total forgiveness is not approval of what they did. You're not approving of it. It's not approval. God doesn't approve of our sin. He forgives it, but he doesn't approve of it. That's why he told the woman who was caught in the act of adultery, go and sin no more. He didn't forgive it and say, okay, well, go back to your normal life. No, he said, go to a new life. Do something different. Just because we forgive someone doesn't mean we approve of what they did to us. That's not what it means. I never approve of how my husband left his daughter and never paid no child support. He never called on the phone. He never sent birthday. He just disappeared off. I can't. There's no way I can approve of that, right? But I have to forgive it. The second thing is total forgiveness is not excusing what they did. You have to understand, there is no excuse for what somebody did to you. There's no excuse for you hurting anybody, and there's no excuse for anybody hurting you. God doesn't excuse it. He'll forgive it, but he doesn't excuse it. There's no excuse. As a matter of fact, when somebody hurts you, God takes it personally. He hurts with you and for you. People have all kinds of reasons why they hurt you. You've heard the saying, hurting people hurt people, right? But it's not an excuse. Well, I'm hurt. I can't help how I act. No, you need to get healed because that's not an excuse. Wrong is wrong, but we still have to forgive them. I say, it's not an excuse. Yeah, that's right. It's not an excuse, but you still have to forgive them. Yeah. You guys are hilarious. If you could just hear the auditory responses. It's not excusing them. Yeah. Total forgiveness is not justifying what they did. It's not justifying it. It's not justifying it. To justify means to make it right or just. There's no justification for evil. God doesn't expect us to justify a wrong against us, but he expects us to let it go. See, many years ago, because I've always had this justice thing. I don't know when it started, but I hate injustice. And maybe about 10 or 12 years ago, the Lord told me, he said, life is not fair, but I am just. And that helped me when people do me wrong. It helped me to see it through a different lens because life isn't fair. The problem is that the enemy has been let loose and he influences the minds of men. And God has given us a free will, so he's not going to force people not to do bad things. He's in his sovereignty, he doesn't want robots. And so bad things are going to happen to good people. But we're justified by the blood. But God doesn't justify our sin. Did you know that? We're justified. He doesn't justify our sin, he forgives it. But it's never justified. Total forgiveness is not pardoning what they did. A pardon is actually a legal transaction that releases someone from prison, the consequences of their action. There are natural consequences for sin, but we have to forgive. See, how many of you have ever done something really bad and didn't have to pay the price? One time I got a new car. I went to Alabama, so I was falsely accused of a crime I didn't commit, went to jail, got out of jail. My parents had given away everything I had, moved to Alabama because the rent was $400 a month. And I needed to get away from all my old friends because they were all bad influences. So I moved there, and my grandparents helped me get a car because I couldn't get a car because I had no money, so they helped me get a car. Well, I had a brand new car, and I had a lead foot. And so I had to drive for assignment because I was a journalist. I drove one time from Alabama all the way down to Key West to do a story for a major newspaper about this marine project. And man, it's a long drive from Alabama to Key West. It's a long drive from here to Key West. Well, Alabama, it's like 18 hours. And I had a new car. I didn't know how fast. Before I got to Alabama, I had 2 tickets. I was like, oh boy, this is not good. Of course, that didn't slow me down at all. I sped all the way down to Key West. I got a third ticket. I'm like, now I'm in trouble. This is bad. Well, I paid the tickets and everything seemed fine. But 2 years later, a year and a half later, I was driving my daughter to school and I came home over the bridge in Hollywood and I'm getting pulled over. And now I'm getting, every time I used to get pulled over, I would get terrified because that cop like really beat me, the one that put me in jail falsely. I mean, she beat me up. So every time a cop would pull me over, I mean, my heart would start beating and I'd get really scared. Thank God I'm over that now, praise God. But I still don't like it. I still don't like to be, do you like to be pulled over, anybody? I don't like to be pulled over. So this cop pulls me over and I'm like, I know I wasn't speeding. I'm thinking to myself, what did I do? And I texted my friend, I said, please pray. I know what they're gonna do. And he said, your license is suspended and I can take you to jail right now. I'm like, oh, I'm not going back there, praise God. Not happening. I already been there once. I did time. I did time illegally. It wasn't even legal to put me in there, so you can count that toward this and let me go. And just let me go. So I texted my friend, please pray for mercy, because he could have taken me to jail if you drive with a suspended license. I didn't know my license was suspended. I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. I didn't know. So I had to do all this stuff, and they said, well, you can't drive for, I don't know how long it was, like a month until this goes through the process, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. And I'm like, well, I've got to take my daughter to school. I'm a single mother. I've got nobody. Like, what am I supposed to do? And I went home and prayed, and I said, Lord, I said, I didn't know. I really did not know. I would never drive with a suspended license. I don't need an excuse for the cops to beat me up again. I'm not going there. And so like 3 days later in the mail, a brand new driver's license came and everything was reinstated with no fees. That was the mercy of God. I don't know how it happened. So I did something wrong, but there was no consequence. But remember when David committed adultery with Bathsheba, and then he had Uriah killed on the battle line to cover up his sin? Well, remember, she got pregnant, right? And they had the baby, but then the baby died. Sometimes we have to pay the consequence for our sin, even though God forgave us. So forgiveness isn't necessarily a pardon. Some consequences just play out. And sometimes in God's mercy, and this is where we don't understand the sovereignty of God and why sometimes he chooses to allow something to, and sometimes he intervenes. I think I'd had so many bad breaks, God just intervened and he knew I didn't do anything, on purpose. But it's not pardoning what they did. Total forgiveness does not necessarily mean reconciliation.